On this edition of Sightings, dramatic new video from Gulf Breeze, Florida demonstrates why that area has become the world's greatest UFO hotspot. Startling first-person accounts of parents who communicated with their children years before they were ever born.
The close-up of a little boy's face appeared, and he said, "Mommy, I'm coming."
England's Chillingham Castle is everything a medieval castle should be, including haunted.
It would be much more extraordinary to have no spirits floating around here.
Find out how the internet can test your psychic abilities.
The intuition about not putting the cartridge in the gun saved my life.
And why does the mysterious Mayan calendar end in the year 2012?
Welcome to Sightings. I'm Tim White. When Ed Walters snapped the first pictures of a UFO over Gulf Breeze, Florida in 1987, skeptics discounted the incident as just another paranormal parlor trick. But since then, the anomalous craft have kept coming. Hundreds of people have seen them, and Gulf Breeze is now the acknowledged world capital for professional investigators and skywatchers alike. But why Gulf Breeze? And why now?
If you look, you'll see them, because they're there.
On vacation in 1991, Carol and Ken Baker and their daughter Jennifer fell in love with the charm of Gulf Breeze, Florida, and decided to move here. The Bakers did not know that they were moving into UFO Central, and frankly, at the time, they wouldn't have cared.
My husband and I often discuss it, and we really can't remember having had a conversation about UFOs in our life.
We weren't familiar with anything involving UFOs. We had no interest in UFOs. I don't even watch science fiction.
All that changed, however, on a balmy April evening in 1994. Carol was driving Ken to work.
I jammed the brakes on, and we were looking, out of the side of the car at it, and it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. We couldn't tell if it was three-dimensional, but it did look like a sphere that was about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle. And there was some kind of swirling inside of it, like a gas. And the thing that struck us most was it was extremely bright.
I felt it was my civic responsibility to actually report what I saw, because I didn't know what it was.
Our first instinct was probably to call the police or the military. And then we thought, well, maybe, that's not such a good idea. They'll think we're crazy. And someone where my husband works at the post office said, well, there's a UFO group in Pensacola, you should call them.
Show me the area where you were.
It was then that the Bakers had their first contact with the local Pensacola chapter of MUFON. They filed a sighting report and heard about Shoreline Park, the now famous spot where thousands of amateur skywatchers have gathered to scan the heavens for signs of extraterrestrial spacecraft. It all started with this photo and the man who snapped it, Ed Walters. In 1987, Walters released supposed hard evidence of a craft witnessed by many others, including local MUFON president Art Hufford.
By the middle of 1988, there were some 500 witnesses who had also come forward with UFO sighting reports. So it became a real hot issue in the area. And by the middle of January of 1991, sky watches had become a 7-night-a-week, year-round activity.
So we started to go, I guess, in May to Shoreline Park on a regular basis, maybe, 3 nights a week, 4 nights a week sometimes. And it was August the 12th before we had a sighting at Shoreline Park, and it was very different to what we had seen. And we've been just at this ever since now. It's a consuming interest for both of us.
At first, the Bakers were simply curious, but it was not long after their sighting at Shoreline Park that Carol and Ken began writing a weekly newspaper article about the Gulf Breeze UFO phenomenon.
The Allen newspaper.
I started to ask why, these things were occurring and nobody wanted to write them. The Islander had published articles in the past, but there had been nobody that was able to do them. And I started in November 94, and for all of 95, it was almost a weekly occurrence. We had so many sightings.
Oh my God, just hovering right there.
Then, on July 21st, 1995, Ed Walters, the man who got Gulf Breeze residents searching the skies in the first place, captured another dramatic UFO appearance on videotape.
I thought I saw from my office window that looks out over this sound a very fast UFO, something, streak by. So I set up the camera, turned it on, went to work. Before I left, I came back in the room, and by God, there it was. Whoa, 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 there it is, off to the left, coming this way. So I just spoke aloud as to what I was seeing as the UFO maneuvered. Doing a loop. Didn't get a whole lot of it, but it caught it as it came into field of view, turned, reversed its field, and swung around and left.
This UFO looked fake, so Walters contacted UFO analyst Dr. Bruce Maccabee. Dr. Maccabee is a research physicist under contract to the U.S. Navy and is an expert photo analyst. He is also director of the Maryland chapter of MUFON. When Ed Walters first called Dr. Maccabee, he explained why this video could not have been faked.
As we talked, I noticed down below the UFO, along the tree line, you could see the movement of a shadow that moved with the UFO.
Coming back, doing a loop, doing a loop. This videotape is very unique because of the fact that that shadow appears on a surface which is so far away it rules out the hoax.
But when Jeff Sainio, staff photo and video analyst for MUFON International, first saw the tape, he was far less impressed.
My first impression on seeing the video is, this is a really poor fake. I was not impressed at all. What changed my mind regarding it was a careful frame-by-frame check. Okay, up here we see the UFO in the enhanced version, and down here, with the background subtraction, you can see an enhanced version of the shadow somewhat more clearly. So that complicates the fakery of this video. This video is the first time I've ever seen a shadow of a UFO on videotape.
But then, so much of the video that comes out of Gulf Breeze is one of a kind.
I think definitely there are certain areas in the world that seem to have a higher frequency of sightings than others. I've had 2 daylight sightings, and I would say between 100 and 120 nighttime sightings since the first one. It is a very hot spot, so to speak, and I don't know why.
Perhaps the same force that drew the Bakers to Gulf Breeze is also drawing in strange objects from another world. Because, for some reason, regular sky watchers here are rarely disappointed by their vigilance. Because most of the best UFO photographs and videos have come from one man, Ed Walters, skeptics charge that Walters is faking his famous evidence. But the jury's still out because so far, none of his material has been proven to be a fake.
Next, parents communicate with their children years before they're born.
It's entirely possible for the children to contact a father or a mother before they're conceived.
It's not unusual for prospective parents to dream about their child before it's born. Psychologists suggest that it's a natural reaction to the stress and anxiety of impending childbirth. However, more and more researchers are beginning to feel that dreams and visions of the unborn are proof of a psychic link between mother, father, and child. And if we listen, we may hear the future.
I was just falling asleep one night like any other night, and just when I was in that half awake, half asleep state, the close-up of a little boy's face appeared right in front of my face, and he said, "Mommy, I'm coming." And then it just hit me that I'm seeing my son-to-be.
At the time, writer Teresa Dana wasn't pregnant or even planning to have children.
When I had that vision of my son, All of the priorities in my life just completely changed. All I wanted from that moment on was the opportunity to be his mother and to nurture him and to help him fulfill his purpose for coming.
Teresa shared her life-changing vision in an open letter to a national magazine. The response was overwhelming. Teresa found out she was not alone.
Dear Teresa, this is why I believe my children let me know they were on their way. In January '93, I began to hear a baby crying in my house. In the fall, I dreamt of a little girl with pigtails running up to me and smiling.
After that letter was published, I received letters from people all over the country explaining very similar instances where people had seen visions or a dream of a child, and they have since had those children, and those children look just like the children in their vision.
We're not talking about just one or two cases here. We're talking about what I think is really sort of the leading edge of exploration or of scientific discovery.
Dr. David Chamberlain is the president of the Association for Pre- and Perinatal Psychology and Health. He has devoted the past 20 years to the study of infant development.
The new evidence is overwhelming as far as I'm concerned for the great intelligence and wisdom of these babies long before they should have any at all. It's entirely possible for the children to exert their influence and make an appearance and contact a father or a mother before they're conceived.
One of the things that brought Aaron and Jeanette Pontius together 24 years ago was their dream of a home full of children. But medical complications during the birth of their first daughter, Angie, forced the young couple to reevaluate their life plan.
It was always a traumatic experience for me, and so it made it hard to even consider having another child. Even though mother and daughter pulled through fine, it was still something you just don't forget.
Since then, the Pontiuses have had more children, but each birth has taken its toll on Jeanette. After 4 children, all girls, doctors warned that another childbirth would be extremely risky. But then Jeanette had a premonition.
I was sitting there looking through this family history. It was a definite, clear message to me that we would have a son and his name would be Michael.
Despite what Jeanette felt was a clear message from her unborn son, her health was failing. Jeanette's doctors warned her again about the dangers of childbirth and recommended surgery that would prevent Jeanette from having any more children. Reluctantly, Jeanette called to schedule the surgery.
As my hand touched the phone, I looked up, and across the room stood this very cute little red-headed boy with the saddest face. He appeared to be about 3 years of age. He never said a word, but the message was on his face: "Why don't you want me?" I took a step towards where he was. As I did this, he took a step backwards, and as he stepped backwards, he just faded and disappeared, and he was gone.
I think these mothers and fathers that are in touch with their babies by one means or another, a vision or a dream, are exercising psychic ability. It's telepathy. It's beyond the ordinary senses.
Although he didn't call it telepathy, Aaron too experienced a strange sense that his family was incomplete.
Several times at the dinner table, we'd all sit down to have dinner. There would be the 4 girls, my wife and I'd say, well, who's missing? You know, and it was an unconscious thing that I would say. It was never intentional, and I said it several times, I guess, more than I really remember.
But it was the Pontius children who saw Michael most clearly and claimed to have made contact with their brother.
The next morning after I had seen Michael, I was in my living room, and Heather came running down the hall, and she was really excited and in a hurry. And she says, "Come quick, hurry and come play with Michael before he leaves."
Heather, now 17, vividly recalls that first extraordinary encounter.
He was sitting Indian style and had his arms down on his knees. And he just had this like little smile on his face, and we ran down the hall along with my mom following us, and by the time we had all got in the room, he had just disappeared. And I wasn't scared or anything. I felt that he was there for a good reason, not to harm us.
The following night, Karen woke up in the middle of the night just hysterical or something.
She explained how she had been laying there in bed and she could see this boy over the foot of her bed. And when we asked her where this boy went, her explanation was exactly this. She says he didn't hop, he didn't skip, and he didn't jump, but he just went up and he disappeared. And she pointed to the ceiling and she said he was gone.
Of course, I was a little bit stunned by what she was explaining, and I very carefully asked Karen, I said, well, what was this boy's name? And she says, Michael. And so I thought, well, I give up. There must be a boy. And so I finally accepted the idea that we were to have a boy.
For the Pontius family, listening to their hearts was a gamble that paid off. Michael Pontius was born 15 months later with no complications.
It makes me feel very special and important to be down here, and I think I'm down here for a very special reason, to do something for somebody or just to be down here to help my family.
The little boy that I saw that day is just identical to what our son Michael looked at age 3. His hair, the coloring, the shape of his face, everything.
I believe that these children can make themselves known before they're born if it's deemed necessary. I think it happens when the parents-to-be need to be woke up and say, you know, look alive, here we are, and we need to be taken care of.
Although Michael believes that he was put on the earth for a special purpose and continues to wonder what that will be, his parents believe that he's already fulfilled his destiny to be part of a loving family. And since his birth, the visions and dreams have stopped.
Next, a rash of sightings in the Lone Star State. Later, the frightening secret of England's Chillingham Castle.
Here are some of the stories Sightings is following in the news. For years, mysterious lights over Marfa, Texas had locals convinced that they were Grand Central Station for flying saucers. The Marfa lights have since been explained away as natural phenomenon. But new lights in Texas cannot be written off so easily. In Houston, Texas, in fact, throughout the Lone Star State, an unprecedented wave of UFO sightings have skywatchers here on alert.
Wow. That ain't no airplane.
There is a possibility that what's taking place right now could be the beginning of a large UFO flap.
Dale Musser is senior investigator for the Houston branch of the Mutual UFO Network. For the past 2 years, Musser has seen a dramatic increase in UFO activity in Texas, especially now. Most recently, there have been videotaped sightings in Cleburne, West Columbia, and New Braunfels.
See it? Yeah, what is that? I don't know. It's awful high, whatever it is.
Musser believes that the arrival of these UFOs are part of a pattern of visitation. Figure out the pattern, he says, and we may be able to predict and prepare for future contact.
We have noticed a pattern that does occur. It's very difficult to map out, but what we're beginning to see is that if you can catch when a flap first starts, that it will go on for several months, and then usually there's a big pause. And almost a year to the day later, there will be another flap.
If Musser's theory is correct, the fall of 1997 should be prime time for UFO sightings in Texas.
Regardless of what happens, we're going to continue to watch the skies, and we plan to keep our eyes open.
In San Diego, California, at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, the aliens have landed, buried deep inside these innocuous-looking rocks. The rocks come from this crater near Sudbury, Ontario, Canada, created after a meteorite the size of Manhattan impacted Earth 2 billion years ago. Analyzing the rocks at Scripps, Dr. Luann Becker made a startling discovery. Dr. Becker found carbon, an element of all life on Earth. But the carbon in these rocks may have come from someplace else.
The reason that we believe that the carbon in the Sudbury rocks may be extraterrestrial in origin is because we have discovered this rather new form of carbon called fullerenes or buckyballs.
Buckyballs because the uniquely shaped molecules resemble Buckminster Fuller's geodesic domes.
It's literally a soccer ball shaped form of carbon. It's hollow, and it does have the potential to hold other atoms inside of it.
Dr. Becker discovered the buckyballs during a routine carbon test on the Sudbury rocks.
One of the first indications I had that we had something very interesting was that after I had extracted the rock and concentrated up the solution, I had kind of a nice wine red colored solution, which typically is characteristic of what fullerenes look like. So that was really pretty exciting.
Because these molecules can carry and preserve other elements inside them, buckyballs have been likened to a kind of extraterrestrial Tupperware, carrying oxygen, helium, and other building blocks of life from galaxy to galaxy.
There could be potential possibility that life absolutely was facilitated by something that didn't actually originate on the Earth.
Inside the buckyballs, inside the Sudbury rocks, Dr. Becker has found helium that is older than the Earth, older than the Sun. Origin unknown.
Certainly there might be life on other planets. That's something we've always been curious about. Perhaps this too suggests the same sort of scenario.
We'll have more stories in the news next time. Now here's what's coming up as Sightings continues.
At Chillingham Castle, there certainly was torture.
As the bloody past of England's Chillingham Castle come back to haunt it.
They got neither food nor water, and they were left to starve to death.
Later, the mystery of the Mayan calendar.
Chillingham Castle on the windswept moors of northern England is a monument to just how dark the Dark Ages could be. There's hardly been a renovation since the 1200s that hasn't uncovered at least one twisted, haunting skeleton. The history of Chillingham Castle has been written in blood, and so, the legend goes, there are many restless spirits here with unfinished business.
It's not a feeling that there's somebody there. It's a feeling that you're not alone, which is slightly different. I've never seen any ghosts, but you don't have to see a thing to believe it. You can know a thing is there without seeing it.
This cold and imposing edifice on the border between England and Scotland is Chillingham Castle. Built by the descendants of William the Conqueror, the castle is inextricably bound to the warfare, torture, and murderous passion of British history. In a letter dated 1520, even the mighty Spanish Armada is warned to stay away from Chillingham or come prepared to fight to the death. The family crest reflects the dark and dangerous forces that are the legacy of Chillingham. The Wakefield bat flies over the castle, and real bats fly around within. And even the present-day owner, Sir Humphrey Wakefield, admits there is an air of evil here.
The atmosphere's right for ghosts, in a way. To me, it would be much more extraordinary to have no spirits floating around here after all the excitement and the horror and the glory and the glamour and the history and the heartache that's been here sort of undisturbed.
The castle's staff have grown accustomed to the eerie atmosphere of an 800-year-old castle, complete with dungeons and torture chambers.
There's quite a lot of eerie places, quite a lot of places that have a funny feel about them. And there's many times you get a certain feeling in a certain part that there's somebody behind you or there's somebody there.
These are the skeletons in Chillingham's closet, the real remains of countless enemies who endured torture so unspeakable that the screams of prisoners begging for death could be heard throughout the castle. This dungeon was called the oubliette, from the French word for forgotten, because that is precisely what happened to prisoners who marked their final days here.
At Chillingham Castle, there certainly was torture, within the walls. And the main one really was if they were taken prisoner for information, in which case they would be taken into the dungeon above the oubliette. Then they lifted the lid of the oubliette and threw them down. They'd fall onto dead bodies that had been there for a while. They knew that an oubliette was to forget, so they were forgotten about. They got neither food nor water, and they were left to starve to death.
Tony Cornell is the UK's preeminent ghost investigator and has spent more than 30 years trying to develop the study of spiritual contact into a bona fide science. Sightings asked Cornell to inspect Chillingham for hard evidence of paranormal activity.
As for Chillingham, is it haunted? Good question. I don't think there's any doubt whatever. Yes, it is. Very haunted.
In over 800 investigations, Cornell has searched for scientific methods to quantify decidedly unscientific phenomena.
And I think that the scientist's attitude that it's rubbish, which a lot of them think it is a very unscientific attitude. If you take the kind of thing we're investigating, apparitions, ghosts, that is, it's been going on pretty well since recorded history.
Cornell began his survey with a search for Lady Grey. Her haunting presence has been reportedly felt for more than a century in halls, towers, and stairways throughout the castle.
She was married to this very able but curious fellow who went off and had a fling with his sister-in-law, who was very pretty. The sister-in-law was called Lady Henrietta Berkeley. Poor old Lady Grey was devastated by her husband running off like that. And throughout the centuries, she famously climbed out of that painting, wandered up and down the stairs, moaning and crying, and wringing her hands and looking for her husband.
I think I've heard the footsteps of Lady Mary about 3 times in different parts of the castle. And you can hear it's a fairly heavy female footstep. It's not a very dainty little one, but definitely female and not male. And it's accompanied by the swish of material, which I'm very sure is taffeta.
Cornell also searched for evidence of the ghostly child known as the Radiant Boy. Childish laughter has been heard, and a child bathed in ethereal blue light has been sighted here by residents and staff.
In the pink room, the temperature used to drop, and then a bright light started to build up in one corner beside the fireplace. And in the center of the light, you start to make out the shape of a boy. And he was dressed in period garments in sort of apparently a blue, silky type of material with knee breeches. And all he did, he just walked across the room and went through the wall.
Photographing a ghost here should be like shooting fish in a barrel, but Sir Humphrey has no such illusions.
It's quite difficult to get Chillingham Castle ghost to perform when an expert is there. Of course, normally I think the spirits shy off and say, we don't want to play games.
Cornell knows that ghosts don't perform on demand, but he's prepared in case one does during his overnight vigil.
What we want to do is get it on record, get it on other instrumentation. Now, surround myself with equipment. I'll use a tape recorder in case there's any footsteps or sound. I'll use a video camera, which will be switched on by infrared if there's any interference with the infrared. What I want to do is find out whether there are any cold spots. So I've got to measure rapid changes of temperature. I shall also try and use some form of electrical detection, because the ghosts may be generated by some form of electrical disturbance. And the whole idea is to put it on record.
This investigation was only preliminary, more of a fact-finding mission than a ghost hunt. Cornell now believes it will take much more equipment and an army of volunteers to ferret out the restless spirits of Chillingham Castle.
There's no doubt in my mind that this castle's got a lot of genuine hauntings and spirits and ghosts, whatever you want to call them. And I think what we've got to do is come back, spend more time, and see if we can get more positive readings. But I'm absolutely convinced that this castle is worthwhile investigating.
Because of the castle's isolated location, the Sightings investigative team was invited to stay at Chillingham overnight. Even though the hospitality was impeccable and our team had investigated dozens of haunted sites just like this one, each member reported feeling very uneasy at Chillingham, unable to sleep, and more than a little relieved when the investigation was over.
Next, a website designed to test your psychic ability.
We believe that ESP not only exists, but it's something that everyone experiences in their lifetime.
Parapsychology is a controversial science with a short and troubled history. This science of the paranormal has been in and out of favor as many times as Saturday Night Live. And history will no doubt record the early 1990s as the nadir of the parapsychology movement. Dr. Dean Radin wants to change all that. His consciousness research lab at UNLV is designing new scientific tests that could make believers out of us all. Volunteers wanted. Experience with ESP, premonition, and the paranormal, a plus. Report to room 114, Consciousness Research Lab. This is where Dr. Dean Radin and his UNLV team are trying to put the science back into psi phenomena.
The overall goal of our lab is to try to get a better understanding of the phenomena that people report out there in the real world, but which are not yet recognized by mainstream science.
Dr. Radin's most recent study concentrates on the two types of ESP that seem to touch the most people, presentiment and precognition.
Presentiment is literally a pre-feeling. It's a feeling about something in the future. So for example, you may be going along the road and suddenly you get a bad feeling about the road you're on. You decide because of that bad feeling to get off the road and try a different route. And later, you hear that there was an accident that occurred moments after you left that road, and you may have been involved in it. Precognition is pre-knowledge, in which you know what's going to happen in the future. Precognition is a case where you're preparing to cross the street, say, and you put a foot out, and suddenly something flashes in your mind where you get this image of a truck just barreling past you all of a sudden. And in this case, you have some message, some knowledge of the future, and so you don't cross the street, and sure enough, the truck suddenly barrels past you. So in the case of presentiment, it's the feeling which caused you to make a different decision. And precognition, it's the knowledge or the vision of the future in which causes you to make a difference.
Claims of seeing or feeling the future are widespread, but entirely anecdotal, and so easily dismissed by mainstream science. Dr. Radin's goal is to design a test to measure ESP empirically.
With the presentiment test, what we do is wire up somebody to look at their electrodromal response, also their heart rate and their blood pressure.
The subject is then presented with a random sample of shocking or calming photographs, with 5 seconds of black in between.
What we're looking at then is, during those first 5 seconds, before the person knows what the picture is, does their physiology change differentially, such that if they're about to see an emotional target or an emotional picture, they're already becoming aroused, whereas if they're going to see a calm picture, they stay calm. And the results of these experiments show very clearly that people do get some aspect of their future emotional experience.
Alex Heindel, a curator at UNLV's Museum of Natural History, was asked to participate in a consciousness research lab experiment after he told Dr. Radin about a chilling psychic experience he had had as a young man.
Several years ago, I was up visiting the family of my then fiancée. And while I was cleaning my revolver, her father asked me if I would take a look at the revolver he had in the house and see if it needed cleaning. And I said, sure. I opened the cylinder on it, and I removed 4 cartridges from the cylinder, cleaned the gun. I put the 4 cartridges that had been in it back in it,
And in the box, there were a number of loose cartridges lying around. One of them was different from the rest. I picked that one up. I started to put it in the 5th empty chamber when the alarms went off in the back of my head and something was saying, don't put that bullet in the gun. I listened to that warning. I simply closed the revolver up with the 4 cartridges in it, leaving the hammer resting on an empty chamber. Some weeks later, I was up again visiting. I was there when my fiance's father realized that his wife had just filed for divorce. He came home, he was obviously upset. He went in and he got the revolver and he was waving it around. At one point he asked me if I knew that his wife was going to file, and I said yes, I had known. And at that point he stuck the revolver in my face and he pulled the trigger. The cylinder rotated so the hammer fell on the chamber that I had almost put the 5th cartridge in. And had I put it in there, you and I would not be having this conversation today. So it's basically my feeling that the intuition about not putting the cartridge in the gun saved my life.
I would say in the case of Alex's story that it was presentiment. And the reason is that he had a bad feeling, but he didn't know what it pertained to. He knew it had something to do with the bullet, and so he acted on that feeling.
In order to reach more volunteers like Alex, Janine Rebman, a UNLV research fellow, has designed a modified online version of the ESP test performed in the Consciousness Research Laboratory.
Our worldwide website has allowed many people in the world to explore our laboratory and take a peek into the research that we're conducting, and it helps them understand a little more about ESP.
Similar to the CRL program, the online test is based on viewing a series of random photographs. Only this time, the subject is asked to describe the picture before viewing the actual image.
And that way we can see if what they recorded about the picture actually matches what the picture is. And that's how we test whether they precognized the picture or not.
Over 7,000 people from around the world have already participated in consciousness research testing. The website is still operational, and soon Dr. Radin's department will begin to compile the data from this first groundbreaking online experiment.
We have had so much research that points to the fact that ESP is a legitimate sensory function that we, at least in the field of parapsychology, certainly believe that ESP not only exists, but it's something that everyone experiences in their lifetime.
If you're interested in participating in UNLV's Internet ESP test, you can access their website on the World Wide Web by typing Consciousness Research Laboratory.
Next, why the Maya thought time would run out in the year 2012.
At the end of the age, there would be a period of chaos, and then there would be a period of rebuilding.
Ready or not, here comes the year 2000. But among many Millennium Watchers, the real fireworks won't begin until the year 2012. That's the magic year the ancient Mayas predicted would transform the world as we know it. But exactly what those changes will be isn't known, and 2012 could just as easily be heaven as Armageddon. In the last millennium, a great civilization of scientists, artists, and warriors, more than 12 million strong, abruptly abandoned their world. They were the Maya, a people of prodigious vision, whose great cities and temples along the present-day Yucatan Peninsula were swallowed up by the jungle after an unknown catastrophe. The Maya left behind great civic centers, temples of worship, houses, apartment buildings. They buried great works of art, pottery, plows, and this, the crowning achievement of Maya culture, their calendar. To this day, it is a puzzle and a passion for modern scholars.
The Maya calendar is one of the wonders of the world in the fact that it is so accurate in terms of its counting ability. To the Maya, time was cyclical, so you returned and you cycled back. They have one major cycle that started in 3113 BC that is going to come to an end in the year 2012.
Arlen and Diane Chase are directors of the Caracol Archaeology Project. For the past 10 years, they have been unearthing many of the lost treasures of the Maya, developing a rare understanding of the ways of the Maya calendar.
Because Maya time was cyclical, events were conceived of as potentially repeating themselves. So you have all of these various cycles that fit together. Certain days were considered to be unlucky. Other days were considered to be very good. It's like looking in your horoscope. Well, the Maya had that same kind of relationship with the calendar. Certain days were good, certain days were bad. Certain years were bad. Certain blocks of 20 years were good and bad.
Each block of time and its so-called personality, whether good or bad, feast or famine, were the teeth on the cogs of the calendar. In this way, the Maya could see not only what day it was, or year, or 20-year period, called a Katun, they could also see what was to come. So the demise of the Maya may have been foretold, or it may have been a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Now, to some extent, you could argue that the Maya collapse itself was a process of the view of Maya time, that they foretold that there was going to be a major problem, and they couldn't survive that problem. The Maya collapse is tied into a Katun of change called an Eta Hau.
And another Eta Hau, a time of change by earth, fire, or water, is coming in 2012. That's also the year, according to the Maya, that a new age begins, a fact of great significance to millennial scholars.
In the West, we have our own millennial feelings. We're expecting the return of a Messiah. We're expecting everything wonderful that might happen after that, but we're also expecting a sort of judgment day. The Mayans had a similar kind of conception, that at the end of the age, there would be a period of chaos, and then there would be a period of rebuilding. Who knows exactly what's going to happen?
Adrian Gilbert is the co-author of the Mayan prophecies and has found astounding parallels between the Maya and the Christian worldview of the fate of humankind.
We have our flood myth, you know, about Noah and so on, and we also have myths about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah in our Western tradition. They had similar sorts of myths. They believed that the world had been destroyed 4 times before. The first time by water, another time by winds, the third time by fire and earth. So it seems like we're coming up for another big change in 2012.
While Gilbert stops short of saying 2012 will be the end of the world, he does believe that Earth is in for a very bumpy ride.
Well, we seem to be reaching some sort of crescendo, don't we? Our population levels keep rising inexorably. Our demands on our environment keep rising all the time. We're depleting the reserves. I mean, even the fish seem to be fished out of the sea now. We're getting to a point where it seems we can't carry on the way we are.
Realistically, what relevance does the Maya culture, or Maya calendar in this case, have for our civilization? The Maya calendar encompasses the Maya worldview. We come from a very different worldview. Should their prophecies be the same ones as ours? I would doubt that very much.
It is Professor Chase's opinion that gloom and doom predictions based on the Maya calendar are little more than New Age musings. But his conclusions based on science and scholarship echo the same sentiment. Learn from the Maya so history does not repeat itself.
The lesson that we learn from archaeology is that the Maya were living on their ecological edge. They've exploited the countryside, their population base is huge. All it would take is a sudden little imbalance in the system for the system to begin falling apart. And you throw in warfare, I think that you see that you have a very volatile mix, which could have led to their rapid decline in a situation that we consider to be a collapse.
New Age messenger or traditional scientist, what seems most interesting about their interpretations of the Maya prophecy is that both sides have taken different paths to the same end. Although the date December 22nd, 2012 is literally etched in stone, most Maya scholars believe the Maya were offering a warning, not a prophecy. It's not too late to change the course of history, the Mayas seem to be saying, but time is running out.
If you've had a paranormal experience, please write to us at Sightings. Sightings can also be contacted at America Online at keyword sightings. Download images, sounds, and QuickTime clips from Sightings episodes. On the internet, access information about sightings and the paranormal at sci-fi.com/sightings.
Until next time, remember, no mystery is closed to an open mind. For Sightings, I'm Tim White.
Next on Sci-Fi, Dark Shadows.
This is freighter number 17. We assume that we've been listed as missing, and any search for us ended months ago.
Jason London stars in Alien Cargo. Friday at 9 p.m. Only on Sci-Fi.